Okay, in our last lecture, we talked about how Hitler's early life and how he kind of started to rise to power. And in this lecture, we're going to go a little bit further and kind of talk about how he kind of solidifies his power in Germany. So, if you remember from our last lecture, we talked about how Hitler was not elected in the 1933 election. He is appointed to the position of chancellor in 1933 because the president knows he's kind of being a pester, Hitler is, in his party, and they think that if they just give him this chancellor position, which really doesn't hold that much power, that it'll kind of make him stop pestering him, and it'll kind of give him what he wants but doesn't really give him any power. And we also talked about how the emergency Reichstag decree was put forth, where that nullified key German civil rights. And it was the beginning of a period known as Gleichschaltung. Gleichschaltung means forcible coordination, so like bringing together Germany, but forcibly. Okay, so moving forward. So again, Gleichschaltung, again, German word, it means coordination or making of the same. This is really the process by which Hitler's party gains political power. They start to eliminate from Germany any non-Nazi groups, social organizations, etc. So how does he do it? Hitler's not the president yet, so he does not have full control of Germany. Hindenburg, Paul von Hindenburg, is the president. He's conservative, but not from the Nazi Party, but kind of shares some of the similar beliefs, but he's not quite as extreme. Hindenburg's advisors, some of whom are in the Nazi Party, persuaded him to use emergency powers. Okay, Hindenburg is conservative, so he's anti-communist, and basically they're saying, look at what this Communist Party and the Socialist Party are doing. We have to make sure that we're taking like extreme measures so that things like this, like the Reichstag fire, don't happen again. And so they kind of convince him to use emergency powers, and then they start to reorganize the government. And they reorganize the government so it's the president, the chancellor, and cabinet members who have all the power, which is different than how the government was organized prior to this. They are now allowed to rule by emergency decree, meaning that they do not have to pass laws through the Reichstag, which is their parliament or their lawmaking body. Okay, they can just bypass that. They don't have to vote on anything, and they can start rolling out these emergency decrees because of the way they reorganized the government. So the first thing they do is what's called the Enabling Act, and this kicks all the communists out of the Reichstag. It forces them to lose their seats in parliament. And the power that they had, that the communists had, those seats are transferred to the Nazi Party. So the Weimar Republic, the constitution that they had, held no more power. And other parties are either banned, or they're like the Socialist Party, they're either banned or they slowly fall apart because they don't want to be arrested. Trade unions, which are like labor unions, they are banned. Typically, labor unions like fight for fair wages. They fight for like fair working hours, and those are banned because all of the kind of work programs are going to be under the Nazi Party. Their leaders are imprisoned, and unions and other work involved organizations are forced to merge with what's called the German Labor Front, or the DAF. This is the organization that every worker in Germany has to join. If you want a job in Germany, you had to join the German Labor Front. Then they pass a law called the Law Against the Establishment of Political Parties. So it made it so that no new political parties could form as of July 14th, 1933. Then they passed the Law for the Reconstruction of the Reich, January 1934. This abolished all political institutions. So, like any sort of like political think tanks or any sort of political institutions, They are abolished and all power moves to the central government, which means that local governments, like if you had your local government in Munich and your local government in Berlin and your local government in Nuremberg, those didn't really have any power. All the government is centered around the central government. It would be like all of the decisions in the US being made um, from Washington, D.C., and the states not having any of their own decision making power. So essentially, there's no local power. But at this time, President Hindenburg's still president, so there's a very small separation of power. But again, he tends to be more conservative at this time, and he's actually pretty sick at this time and not in Germany. He's at a vacation home elsewhere, so he's not really exercising his presidential power to the fullest. So then Hindenburg dies. So during the passing, like I said before, during the passing of these laws, Hindenburg was ill. He was out of the country and he was at his vacation home. Hitler and the Nazi Party knew that he was getting ready to die. And so 3 hours before he dies, they pass a law that would take effect immediately upon his death. They made a law so that the office of the president was to be merged with the office of the chancellor. So remember that Hitler is the current chancellor. So Hitler, upon Hindenburg's death, becomes the president and he is also the chancellor. So he has a dual role. He is called the Fuhrer or leader and chancellor. So now it got rid of any remaining separation of power. The Weimar Republic was completely dissolved, and then Hitler truly had all of the power. From here, once Hitler has full control, things are going to get very, very extreme. Okay, the Nazi Party's in control. He has full control of the legislative making power. The Nazi Party has more seats because they kicked all the communists out. And now Hitler has both the role of president and chancellor. And that is how things start to take a turn and going to lead us into World War II.